Hello, thank you for joining us. Hope you're having a fantastic Thursday. Great start to your June. Part 2 of a 4-part series, a super webinar series around e-bike safety, risk, retailer best practices. The NBDA has teamed up with a panel of experts to help us on this 4-part webinar series. And we're forever grateful to the team at Human Powered Solutions for helping us, and Mike Fritz, who has joined us today. Mike Fritz is the Chief Technology Officer at Human Powered Solutions, who's been really leading the charge and really gathering all the information and presenting it multiple times with us now to our retailers in the industry at large about the safe storage and charging of lithium-ion batteries. I know Mike, it's very near and dear to his heart, and he's very concerned, as well as the NBDA and everyone else looking at this. And today we're putting a little bit different approach to the information as we present it to you, because we want to make sure that retailers are aware of the best practices around how you should be educating consumers at the time of purchase when they're leaving your store with their new bicycle that has the lithium-ion battery on it. Following today's presentation, we do have a formal document that's been prepared by the NBDA and Human Powered Solutions that lives on the NBDA member resources site that is available to download, which you can hand out to consumers in store. I don't want to give too much away, so I'm going to turn it over to Mike. He's got a presentation, and at the end, we'll conclude with a question and answer presentation. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate the opportunity to carry this message to our industry and our consumers. It's important to know, and I think we need to do as good a job as possible raising the awareness in the minds of our customers that while these batteries are tremendously functional in terms of their ability to power our light electric vehicles over great distances and generating a lot of torque for acceleration and hill climbing, there is a downside to it. And to anybody that's been following this series of webinars, you know that we're trying to do that. We're trying to point out the issues of which our dealers and consumers should be aware of. One thing troubles me a little bit. What I don't want to do, and what I hope our retail partners do not do, is scare consumers relative to electric bicycles. These things are tremendous products, and you know, they do wonderful things for us, and it really is the future. The benefits in efficient, clean transportation and fitness and fun recreation for a broader audience, for a broader user base, is a tremendous advantage. But as long as our users have in the back of their minds that these battery packs are extremely high energy dense and they need certain care, and that certain precautions are necessary to ensure safe usage, it's going to be a better world thanks to our industry and this wonderful product. Without further ado, I think we're all aware of some of the issues that we're dealing with. Most people, again, anybody that's been following our webinars is aware that New York City in particular has had a rash of fires, significant property damage, some injuries, and unfortunately some deaths associated with lithium-ion batteries. Now, there are a lot of factors at play in New York relative to this. New York has the highest density of delivery services that utilize e-bikes, and for legitimate reasons, those e-bikes are not necessarily the best, highest quality e-bikes. The people that use them are in an economic strata that can't afford some of the more sophisticated bikes, and we're quite concerned that those bikes are equipped with batteries that might not be up to snuff relative to their reliability and safety. But the point is again, there's a lot of energy stored in these battery packs, and the uncontrolled release of that energy does present a significant hazard. And for people that are selling and buying higher quality e-bikes, that risk is minimized, yet it's still there. It's not zero. And communicating that to our users and asking them to adopt certain practices and procedures relative to the use and storage and maintenance of those battery packs, I think is critically important. And it's clearly our responsibility to raise that awareness. I mean, we're the experts, from a design, development, manufacture, distribution, and sale of these e-bikes. It's clearly in our wheelhouse to take the lead in terms of making sure that people are aware of this, and that if they adopt the proper procedures and policies relative to their batteries and their bikes, they're going to enjoy a long period of very high utility transportation. But before we actually get into the details of my recommendations, what I'd like to do, again, in the vein of assuring people that they're really entering a very neat place, what I would recommend upon delivery of a new e-bike is congratulate that new owner for participating in this micromobility revolution. This really is an important development in our transportation infrastructure and in our society in general. And we're really doing good things. We're doing good things for the environment. We're doing good things for our customers. And this is something that they should be proud of participating in. As I say, with the proper guidance, it can be a very enjoyable, high utility way of getting around. We need to ensure our new users that many miles of pleasurable, clean, and efficient transportation are ahead of them in terms of commuting, recreation, and fitness. These are all benefits that they will accrue through the use of these wonderful products. But you need to advise them that the batteries that power them are safe when properly used and maintained. That's the important key. There are certain conscientious steps that must be taken to ensure that those battery packs offer that long life and reliable and safe operation. Be sure to provide the owner's manual that you're given from the distributor and any additional materials relative to the bike to your customers so that they have a full library, if you will, of proper guidance relative to the use and maintenance of their bike. And as Heather alluded, we've just drafted and posted the guidelines that we're going to talk about in this webinar today on the NBDA website. So these will be available to you at NBDA. And obviously strongly encourage adherence to these guidelines because, as I say, they're not difficult, they're not challenging, they're relatively easy to do, but doing them again will ensure that the people that buy our e-bikes are satisfied with their purchase and do not encounter any unpleasant scenarios associated with the bike. Just specifically with respect to the guidelines that we recommend, one of the most important things is that the consumer use only the charger that was supplied with their e-bike for charging that battery pack. They should never, ever try to use a charger that wasn't supplied with the battery pack. And for heaven's sakes, never try using a power supply. As we've attempted to convey in previous webinars in recent past, an e-bike is a collection of systems. There's a battery charger, a battery pack, a battery management system, a motor controller, a motor, a wiring harness, displays, throttles, sensors, yada, yada. There's a lot of stuff that's incorporated into that bike that are all balanced for that particular application. And most important is the fact that we match a charger to the battery pack. The battery management system is programmed to see the energy input from that charger and regulate the energy input from that charger. But the introduction of a non-standard charger or a power supply can throw that balance completely out of whack and result in a dangerous scenario. We also admonish users to never, ever open or otherwise tamper with their battery pack. A lot of people that are engaged in electric bicycles are tinkerers, engineers that love to see how something works. And speaking from firsthand experience, it's fun to open a product and take a look at the guts and try to understand what's going on there. But I can assure you from firsthand experience that an open battery pack packed full of lithium-ion battery cells represents a hazard. Dropping a tool, inadvertently shorting a couple of cells to each other can result in a fire. So it is very, very important to advise your customers never ever to open that battery pack. And the other thing too is opening a pack will void its warranty for good reason. It's not something that ever needs to be done in the field, and it's something that should never be done in the field. When charging the bike, we get a lot of questions. Is it better to charge the battery installed on the bicycle or off the bike? And it really doesn't matter. I would say it's preferable to charge it on the bike. The reason I say that is if there is an incident and you need to get that battery pack out of your immediate environment, it's pretty easy just to roll the bike outside and leave it there and call the fire department if in fact the battery pack is failing. But if you choose to charge the battery pack off of the bike, which is just as fine, we recommend that you place it on a non-flammable surface like a garage floor, a concrete floor, such that if there ever is an issue with that particular battery pack, it's not going to ignite the surface that it's resting on while it's being charged. Don't put it on a wooden workbench. For heaven's sakes, don't bring it inside and put it on a kitchen counter. It's just best practice to make sure that that battery is charged on an non-flammable surface. And again, I'll emphasize again, the likelihood of an incident is minuscule. But when they do happen, it's a serious issue, and you need to take steps to mitigate the potential damage in the event that a battery pack ever fails. It's good practice to charge the battery pack in an area with a working smoke detector. When these packs do fail, they fail relatively slowly at first, and they emanate smoke that can be detected by a smoke detector that will alert the user to the fact that something is going wrong and give them an opportunity to take actions to mitigate it. Never charge the battery unattended overnight. I've said this 1,000 times. A lot of the incidents and the unfortunate results of the fires that have happened in New York occur overnight. The messenger or the delivery bike driver parks his bike, connects the charger, anticipating that when he gets up the next morning to go to work, he's got a full battery pack. But while he's asleep, if there's a failure, it slows down the reaction. And oftentimes the first notice that there's an issue is the sirens of the fire department coming, and you certainly don't want to experience that. But one particular note about this admonition, Underwriters Laboratories, which everyone is familiar with, they certify the products, the electrical products that we use every day in our homes and workplaces. Underwriters Laboratories has developed voluntary safety standards for e-bike electrical systems and the lithium-ion batteries that power our e-bikes. Once these standards are widely adopted by the e-bike industry, these standards will go a long way to ensuring that the batteries used to power e-bikes are safe and reliable. We anticipate that once all e-bikes that are sold in the United States comply with these standards, this particular recommendation will go away. But at the present time, the vast majority of bikes or batteries on electric bikes have not been tested or certified to these UL standards. So that's why we will continue to offer this guideline until such time as there's broad distribution or broad acceptance of and compliance with the Underwriter Lab standards. NBDA and Human Powered Solutions is working very closely right now with Underwriters Labs, working to encourage our industry to adopt these standards and ensure that all the products that we sell do comply and thus are significantly safer than the situation that we're faced with right now. But in the meantime, never charge the battery unattended. Don't put it on the charger and go to bed. That's just not good practice. We recommend that you monitor the battery and charger during the charging process. When the charger indicates that the battery has been fully charged and the charging process is over, disconnect the charger from the wall and unplug it from the battery. Again, just a good common practice to make sure that we're being as safe as possible with respect to this particularly important process. We recommend that you don't leave the charger turned on, plugged into the wall, and connected to the battery indefinitely. A lot of people think that, well, if I give it another couple of hours, I'll top off the charge. When the charger says it's finished, it's basically receiving signals from the battery management system that the battery pack is full. Leaving the charger on the bike and supposedly topping it off doesn't really do anything. Unplug the charger, unplug the battery, put it back on the bike or leave it on the non-flammable surface and go about your business. Most of us, or a lot of us, live in areas where we've got a limited riding season due to the seasons, the weather. If you put your bike up for the winter and you're not going to use that battery pack for an extended period of time, we recommend that you place the battery pack in a clean, dry environment away from flammable materials. It's best to store the battery pack at temperatures between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. You never want to freeze a battery pack. That will cripple it for future service. So always make sure that the environment that it's stored in remains above freezing. For example, if you have a garage and the garage is heated, great. If it's not, bring the battery pack in, put it in the basement, put it on a non-flammable surface, and leave it stored for the duration of that season. And you also don't want to overheat the battery in its environment. We recommend against storing leaving a battery pack in a closed up car during the summertime, with the heat baking down on the car and elevating the internal temperature of the car. It takes a lot of heat to actually trigger a lithium-ion battery fire, but overheating those cells when they're not in service can also compromise their utility and safety for future use. So try to maintain that battery pack within these reasonable temperatures, and you'll enjoy a good long life from your battery pack. It's always best to store the battery pack less than fully charged. A lot of times you'll hear recommendations, fully charge the battery and then top it off, every couple of weeks or every couple of months. The lower the state of charge in the battery pack, the less stress those cells are under during that period of storage. So we recommend partially discharging the battery, ride it around until you only have 2 or 3 LEDs on your state of charge indicator, and store it in that partially discharged condition. But at the same time, it's important to top that off over a period of time. Allowing a battery to deeply discharge due to the parasitic drain that's embedded in the cells in the battery management system will also compromise the life of the battery pack. So my recommendation is store it at about 50 to 60% state of charge, and then top it off for an hour or so every 2 months. That will make sure that the battery doesn't fall too deeply discharged, resulting in detrimental effects in the cells, primarily dendritic cell growth. But at the same time, it ensures that the battery is ready for charging when the riding season begins again. This is critical. A damaged battery pack is much more susceptible to a catastrophic failure. Dropping a battery pack, for example, could disrupt the circuits inside the pack, could result in a potential short circuit, could compromise the function of the battery management system. If your battery is dropped or damaged or immersed in water, do not attempt to charge it. It could manifest potentially catastrophic failures in that condition. If your battery pack is damaged, we recommend that you store it in a safe place, preferably out of doors, until you can take it to a facility to have it checked to make sure that the damage is not potentially dangerous and is not going to compromise the safety of the pack. So that's very important. E-bike shops that are currently participating in the Call to Recycle battery recycling program have actually been trained in techniques to identify damage to a battery pack that could compromise its safety and stability. So if you bought your e-bike from a shop that participates in the Call to Recycle program, bring it back to those guys. They'll inspect the battery pack. They'll either tell you that there may be an issue here, we recommend recycling right now, or they may sign off on it. They may say, look, this is okay, it's only cosmetic damage, the battery is fine to use for the future. So, but if you suspect that the battery's been damaged, or if it's been immersed in water, please have it checked before you charge it again, and have it checked before you use it again. If a battery does fail, what you need to do is, and again, this is why we want to monitor batteries while they're being charged. If you notice an odor, smoke emanating from the pack, potentially melting of a plastic case if the battery is encased in plastic, strange noise coming from the battery pack, it's potentially going into a failure mode that we call thermal runaway. If that occurs, we recommend that you get the battery outdoors, if at all possible, to a safe area away from any flammable materials, and call the fire department. They're best able to handle that. Again, this sounds dramatic, and I guess if it does happen, it is dramatic. But the important thing is that it doesn't happen very often. When your battery pack reaches the end of its useful life and can no longer hold a charge that satisfies your missions, if you don't get the range that you need in commuting or whatever it might be, we recommend that you return it to your dealer for recycling. One thing that is popping up, the other point here is we recommend that you replace your battery pack with a pack from the original source. Buy a battery pack from the dealer that you bought it from. We know that's expensive. The battery is the single most expensive component on an electric bicycle. and to replace it with a comparable battery to the one that was originally supplied with the bicycle is expensive, but it's a whole lot better than trying to have that pack refurbished. You may be aware that there was recently a fire in a South Florida e-bike dealership. That occurred when the dealer had taken the original battery pack from an e-bike, submitted it to a recycling center that apparently replaced all the cells in it and returned it to him. The first time he put it on the charger, after getting it back, it failed, and it resulted in a lot of damage to that shop. We do not recommend attempting to have a battery pack refurbished. And again, it speaks to the issue that we discussed earlier relative to the fact that these products are systems. The cells have to be properly balanced. The battery management system has to be properly programmed. I don't know of any recycling shops right now that have the ability to do that, such that that pack manifests the same reliability that it did when it was new. And we especially recommend that you don't buy a knockoff battery pack from a third party, not the original supplier of the e-bike, again, because they were not involved in the integration of those components in that battery or in that e-bike, and could very well be providing you with a product that's not safe for use in your e-bike and could potentially result in a catastrophic issue. Here again, and I repeat this a lot, the chances that a consumer or a dealer, for that matter, will experience an e-bike battery pack fire are minuscule. It doesn't happen very often. The packs that are sold with quality e-bikes today are basically safe and reliable. The risk is minimal, but it's not zero. So these guidelines are intended to encourage customers to take these precautions, because the precautions listed above are more than justified given the potential damage in the event that an e-bike battery fails. So we believe, taking a little extra effort to make sure that you're charging the battery pack in a safe environment, utilizing the proper charger, and monitoring the charging process is well worth the effort, because in the unlikely event something does happen, you're better prepared for it, and you'll mitigate the potential damage that can result. Again, these are relatively straightforward. I practice these guidelines myself. Needless to say, I've got a lot of bikes in my stable and a lot of e-bike batteries, and knock on wood, I haven't had any problems, and I would like that experience to be replicated by thousands and thousands and thousands of e-bike customers in our country, because this potentially represents an issue that might hinder the widespread adoption of electric bicycles in society today. And I, for one, sure do not want e-bikes to get a black eye due to the fact that somebody wasn't taking care of their battery. So I do believe that it's well worth your effort to explain to your customers that these steps are very worthwhile, and it will ensure that they have a safe and pleasurable experience with their bikes. Again, these guidelines will be posted on the NBDA website for future reference, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions either now or via email questions that might be emailed to me. And again, I'll turn it back over to Heather and Rochelle, and I guess we can open it up for questions.
All right, perfect. We've got quite a few, so I'll just go one by one here. More of a comment. Would it be more appropriate to state only use a charger designed specifically for that battery pack?
Yes, that's the point I'm trying to make. As I say, these are systems. They're systems that are designed and engineered to cooperate with each other, for lack of a better term. There's a sophisticated onboard computer in the battery, in the battery management system, and in effect monitors the charging process. It anticipates energy input that's been programmed into that battery pack. Only use the charger that was supplied with the battery, or a replacement charger from the same source.
A lot of people like loading up power strips. How much draw do the chargers pull if one is plugged into a strip? Do we want to explain not to plug it into a strip?
It's, chargers, the charging process for an e-bike battery is limited to about 4 amps. And that's a fast charger. converting 120 volt AC current into 4 DC amps is not a heavy power draw. So the charger itself doesn't draw that much power. So a power strip could probably handle, several e-bike batteries charging all at the same time. So I would be less worried about the charging strip scenario than I would be having a number of batteries in close proximity charging at the same time. New York is currently in the process of promulgating new building codes that restrict the distance or specify a specified distance between charging batteries, such that if one fails, it's not so close to its neighbor that it's going to cause that one to cook off. So you just need to be careful with respect to spacing of it. Again, the power strip itself should be able to handle the current draw from the battery charger within limits, of course. I don't know that I would put 10 chargers on a long power strip at the same time. Certainly 2 or 3 is not going to be dangerous, but it's more the proximity, I would say, of the battery packs, pack to pack, that would be the issue.
Somebody asked, speaking of storage, how about hanging the battery on a wall or upside down?
The orientation of the pack doesn't matter. The cells don't care what their orientation is in the battery pack. I would be concerned that, if a pack is elevated, is there a chance that it might fail and be damaged when it hit the floor? But there is no concern. This is not like a lead acid battery in an automobile that's filled with liquid electrolyte. The cells don't care what their orientation is. So hanging it upside down or hanging it on a wall is not going to be a problem. I'd be curious as to whether or not they intended to charge it in that orientation. But again, there shouldn't be an issue with that either, as long as it wasn't hanging on a wooden post, for example. Our recommendation is that it be attached to or resting on a non-flammable surface.
Some bike suppliers are recommending to charge beyond the green light coming on in order to balance the battery. They claim that the charger will cycle on and off, essentially trickle charging it and balance the battery.
I don't recommend that. The battery management system controls cell balancing, and it doesn't rely on the charger for that function. So I would hesitate to recommend that. My recommendation is when the green light turns on the charger, turn it off and unplug it.
Question, while charging clients' bicycles, we've noticed that some chargers are warm, others become very hot. The temperature of each charger varies. What is the acceptable temperature?
That's a very good question. I guess what I would say is that's not something that the user necessarily needs to worry about, because there are thermistors embedded in the battery pack itself that if they detect high temperatures, they shut down the pack completely. They open the field effect transistors that control the current flow and simply turn everything off. It's not unusual for a battery charger to get warm. The whole process of converting 120 volt AC to 4 or 5 or to it's usually, if it's a 48 volt battery pack, it's usually charged to about 53 volts DC. So that does involve some resistance, and the quality of the charger probably comes into play. But a hot charger is not necessarily a problem, and a hot battery is managed by the battery management system. So that's there. I mean, unless it gets too hot to touch, I don't think that would be an issue.
As technology improves with batteries and bikes age and change design, sometimes you see parts for bikes discontinued. Considering the cost of these bikes, what should we tell a customer that's unable to replace a battery from the original brand due to the brand's lineup changing or design change?
That's a very good question. And quite frankly, I hadn't considered it. In other words, if an e-bike supplier goes out of business, for example, or if the cycle life on a particular bike ends and it's no longer supported, what do you do to replace the battery? That's a very good question. I frankly don't have an answer to that at the present time. I think federal law mandates that replacement parts for discontinued products must be maintained to service those products for a period of time after that product is discontinued. That might merit some additional research to find out, but it would not be wise. I mean, if you couldn't procure a replacement pack from the original source, I would not recommend finding a replacement pack from a third party. That would be one that would necessitate some additional study to come up with a good recommendation.
Do you know where retailers can find out which bike suppliers are UL certified?
That's something that we're working on. We want to be able to offer that information, and that's one of the topics that we're in pretty regular conversations with UL. They do have websites that identify compliant products, but a lot of times the entity that has obtained compliance for the product is not the name that you're familiar with. And we're in the process now of attempting to develop an index that will be available through NBDA, assuming we're successful, that will do that. Because that is a key element. That's one of the best practices that we're recommending and will continue to promote, is only selling products through your store that have UL certification. But certainly your supplier should be in a position to advise you relative to that. If somebody comes in offering to sell you a line of e-bikes, the first question out of my mind is are they UL compliant? And if they are, please provide documentation to that effect. And it doesn't have to necessarily be hard copy documentation, but if they can refer you to their website that has available a copy of the compliant certificate, then you can be satisfied that in fact it does comply. Further, UL compliant products are labeled as such. That's one of the aspects of UL certification. If you pick up any electrical appliance in your house and look at the specification label on the bottom, it will tell you whether or not it's UL certified and to what UL standards it is certified to. So that's something that we're working very hard to propagate, if you will, within our industry, is how does a dealer know that the bike is in fact been tested and certified safe by Underwriters Laboratories. And as I say, right now, your best source of that information is the supplier.
The next question is, with more and more awareness about making sure batteries and chargers are tested and certified, are there any mandatory certifications that e-bike companies have to go through? And if not, do you see that changing?
Right now, do we see it changing? Definitely, yes. I mean, it's important. The adoption of electric bikes into our transportation infrastructure is happening in a big way, and clearly, as with any broadly distributed product, we need to be certain that it's safe for its intended use. Currently, as I say, I'm sorry, Michelle, could you repeat the first part of that question? I think I answered the second part.
It was just a qualifier. With more and more awareness about making sure batteries and charges are tested and certified.
Yeah.
Are there any mandatory certifications right now?
Right now, the only mandatory certification that affects an electric bicycle is the charger, because it plugs into the wall. Any electrical product sold in the United States that plugs into a wall, your television set, your mixer, your juicer, whatever it might be, if it plugs into the wall and uses 110 AC current, it must be certified UL compliant. E-bikes don't plug into the wall, and their voltage thresholds are significantly less than 120 volts AC. So currently, as it relates to electric bicycles, with the exception of the charger, there are no mandatory standards in this regard. The only mandatory standard at present that applies to bicycles in general is the Consumer Product Safety Commission standard. And right now, as it relates to the electrical performance of electric bicycles, the CPSC standard only speaks to the allowable power, 750 watts maximum motor power, and the top speed, 20 miles an hour for a class 1 or class 2 bike, and 28 miles an hour for a class 3 bike, according to the People for Bikes classification system. But the UL standards, as they currently exist relative to electric bicycles, 2849 and 2271 are not mandatory. But we are working very hard to encourage our industry to adopt those standards and advise the consuming public accordingly.
If somebody comes in with a damaged battery and the bike shop doesn't have the expertise to check on it, is there a service that they can use? What would you recommend?
Obviously, that's going to vary from locality to locality. If that bike shop participates in the Call to Recital program, the bike shop can call to recycle, and they will transmit a safe storage and transportation container to return that battery pack for recycling. If the retailer does not participate in the call to recycle program, I would not accept the battery pack. I would not take it in my store. A damaged pack is potentially highly potentially dangerous, and the only other option would be to call the fire department and ask their advice relative to what to do.
This next question is a bike shop that says might be a little left of focus here, but any suggestions when a repair bike comes in and the customer doesn't have the key to take the battery with them?
So the battery pack is not removable from the bike at that time?
Correct.
Yeah, what I've been recommending, and that's also a scenario that we're seeing more and more on, is e-bike manufacturers integrate the battery packs such that they're very difficult to remove. It's essentially the same scenario. Under those circumstances, and we've talked about this in previous webinars, my recommendations are that if they do decide to service the bicycle, that first and foremost, do not charge the battery on that bike overnight or unattended anytime the shop is closed. And when the shop is closed, I would recommend positioning that bike or storing the bike away from any flammable materials, such that if the battery pack fails while the shop is unattended, it won't easily set fire to other elements or other stuff in the store. Clearly, as I say, some of the higher priced e-bikes have got battery packs integrated into the down tubes, which are difficult to remove. And so that is a scenario that I think is going to happen more and more often. So if you can't take the battery pack off the bike and you're comfortable with the bike being in the shop, simply park it away from anything else when the shop is unattended, such that it can't, a fire couldn't propagate if in fact the battery fails.
I think we touched on a similar topic earlier, but this question is, what should a customer do if the OEM is out of business or does not supply a battery?
That's, we talked about that, Rochelle. Yes, that's a very good question, and I don't have a ready answer for that. What I don't want to say is, throw the bike away, because clearly that's not an option, especially if they've invested a considerable amount of money into it. That's an issue that needs additional research, because quite frankly, I don't have an answer to that off the top of my head.
Last question, it looks like, should a paper manual be provided instead of an electronic link for an e-bike?
That's a policy decision, I think, that the OE has to make. It's relatively inconceivable. I would think, especially in our country, almost everybody has access to the internet. And, it's certainly cost effective, and there's a lot of benefits to having your instructional manuals and your maintenance manuals and whatnot available online. If you lose the paper copy, there's a place that you can go to retrieve it, essentially. So, but again, it's a very good point. And the clients that I have that are working on e-bike development, it's anticipated that we will publish all of our service and owner's manuals electronically, offering the consumer a link to achieve those. Nevertheless, maybe it's a better practice to offer both, just so that you cover all the bases. But again, that's, it's not necessarily a safety issue, I guess, as long as the consumer avails themselves of the instructional material that the manufacturer offers. And I guess that would be one additional point I could add to that list as to what to tell the customer when you deliver an electric bike, is if there's not paper copies of manuals and warnings and all the rest of that, urge them to go online, and certainly not to just go out and ignore the guidelines and instructions offered by the manufacturer. But that's also a very good question, and it's a very timely question in the industry right now.
Looks like we do only have one more. I've heard that damaged or suspect batteries can be put into a barrel of sand to suppress thermal runaway. Is that correct?
Sand will not suppress thermal runaway. What it will help do is throttle the fire, if you will, for lack of a better term. Sand obviously isn't flammable, Sand, you know, it's better than nothing. In other words, it's better than just leaving the battery on the floor in thermal runaway. But it's not going to put the fire out. You'll still have to wait until such time as all the fuel in that battery pack is expended. We're currently experimenting with a technique that would have you place a battery in thermal runaway in a vat of water. That's what they're doing in a lot of European municipalities with electric cars. They actually develop a truck with a big container of water that they drive to the scene of an electric car fire, and they use a crane or a forklift to pick the car up and dump it in this vat of water. What the theory is that the water will cool adjacent cells and prevent the cell-to-cell propagation that occurs during a thermal runaway. I would recommend, and I have recommended, using the barrel of water technique, because, as I say, that can proactively cool adjacent cells to prevent cell-to-cell propagation. Sand won't do that, but certainly sand is going to help contain, if you will, the fire from the pack in thermal runaway. But it will continue to burn until all the fuel in that pack is expended.
We have one more question that just came in as well. What type of fire extinguisher rating is needed to use on a battery fire, Mike?
People have said that ABC fire extinguishers are good, not D, class D fire extinguishers. But again, you know, I maintain you can't put a lithium-ion battery pack fire out with a fire extinguisher. What you can use the fire extinguisher for is extinguishing any subsequent fires that occur due to propagation of the fire from the battery pack. But once the cell enters thermal runaway and the pressure relief valve at the top of the cell opens and the gaseous electrolyte that's been boiled by the internal temperature of the cell starts venting and catches fire, it won't go out until it expends all of its fuel. It won't go out until all the energy contained in that cell is consumed. The strategy, again, the strategy that I maintain is to affect some sort of mechanism that will cool adjacent cells to prevent that cell-to-cell propagation. A fire extinguisher may do that because the extinguishant that's coming out of the fire extinguisher is cold. It's under pressure. When that pressure is released, the thermodynamics of the situation causes it to be quite cold coming out of the extinguisher. But I don't think it would last long enough to allow the cell that's in thermal runaway to expend its fuel. So I certainly recommend having a ABC class fire extinguisher on hand, but it's not going to put out a lithium-ion battery fire. All it can do is control any subsequent fires that may result from the lithium-ion battery fire. That's what I say is my recommendation is dump it in a 35-gallon trash container full of water and let the water cool the adjacent cells to try to mitigate the cell-to-cell propagation.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you for the excellent questions today from all the retailers. Mike, I know it's not easy to just take the questions at you, but you're an expert. You prove it all the time. For those interested, I did put into the chat online PDF, the guide for e-bike battery safety, which was prepared by the HPS team and Mike. Mike, thank you again for your contribution here, for your continued research, for advocating and helping guide our industry in this field. The UL team I see was on the chat today answering questions as well. We really appreciate their help. They've been fantastic to work with. The next webinar, the part 3 of this series, is coming up June 22nd. You can register on the NBDA website straight online. This is a webinar dedicated to UL 2849, which is the national safety standard for electrical systems for e-bikes. There's lots to learn, lots more to uncover about the UL 2849, and as bicycle retailers, the best practices we need to be equipped with and take forward. Super thankful for the team at UL for helping us and educating retailers. So make sure you join us for that on the 22nd. And recording of this will be available online on our YouTube channel within the next 24 hours or so. Rochelle is fantastic at doing that for us. Please share this video with your staff. And as we mentioned earlier, and it's very important that you go to the NBDA, your member resources login, you will find a PDF that you can download that you can provide to consumers, thanking them for their purchase, welcoming into the e-bike world and getting excited with us, but also all the safe practices around caring for their new purchase and their battery. Any questions, please reach out. Please let us know. Mike has been fantastic fielding questions and answering any retailer who reaches out. Again, thank you for attending this. Any questions, reach out. Have a great afternoon. Bye now.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Mike.